the bad eggs like we're discussing, these people will start up the shell company all the time. And under the law, you can be a nominated supervisor for 2 companies. So they can pretty much have one on the back burner, close the other company, and just shift and keep on going, and that's legal.
G'day guys, welcome to the MTDC Lounge. This is a podcast that breaks down everything you need to know about designing and building your ultimate home and what to expect. Whether you're a DIY renovator, a budding developer, or everything in between, we'll dive into the building journey, touching on what to expect, what's next, and how to go about it. We'll hear from a heap of experienced consultants and trades about all aspects. So let's get stuck in. Welcome to the lounge. G'day guys, and welcome to another night on the lounge. You've got your host with Matt, and tonight we've got Luke Ferguson. How are you, mate?
Not bad.
Good. Yeah, mate. Thanks. Great. Mate, you're a building consultant, and you work for FairGo Building Solutions.
Yeah, that's right. That's my company.
Yeah, that's it. And we got introduced because you've done a couple of jobs for us. You had a bit of a look at the house, and one of the conversations that we've had on site really triggered a few thoughts, and I needed to get you on. I needed to have a chat because a lot of the stuff that we were talking about, the major population doesn't get. The guys who are going through this process just do not understand, the ins and outs of what the HBCF is, and I'll get you to explain that in a hot minute. But I think what's important is we want to try and establish, a method for the guys to be aware of, and how much it's going to cost them at the end of the day, and how do they call you? How do they get in contact with you, and how do they get somebody involved to help them through this really gross process that is the HBCF?
Yeah, well, and complaints in general.
That's it.
A lot of them won't make the marker for HBCF, but you've still got a dispute at hand.
Yeah.
So it's the way to navigate through it.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard. So yeah, mate, let's kick off. Who are you, and what brought you to where you are right now?
Probably got a lengthy background in the industry, over 20 years now. So I started off, I did my carpentry apprenticeship and went through and did my builder's license. Was lucky enough to go through as an MBA apprentice, so managed to see many different hosts, many different sites. Then worked in a few different parts of the industry. So I've worked for window companies right through on, like I say, plenty of sites, strata stuff, right the way through to little reso stuff. And then I started my own building company years ago. Grew it up to a couple of teams of guys. Worked right through the industry, probably doing mostly renovations and things like that, as well as getting into insurance stuff, especially after the Pasha Bulker storm.
Yeah.
So managed to see many insurance claims. And then worked myself up to a point where we were doing well, but I had an on-site injury. On a love job, as it always happens.
Always.
Where I broke my wrist so badly that I had a specialist tell me I had to get off the tools.
Yeah, wow.
So unfortunately, I had to put my building company to rest. The ideas of continuing on gave away a fair bit of work to other builders that I knew at the time. Yep. And spent the next year or so changing, upskilling myself. I did my waterproofing license, asbestos removal courses, all sorts of stuff like that, and then was lucky enough to get picked up with fair trading.
Yeah.
So I actually went on as a building inspector and worked there for a couple of years doing all sorts of their disputes. So when I joined, it was with the dispute resolution and inspections branch, which was the branch at the time that if anybody was to make a complaint with fair trading in the building league, if the works were over 5,000, you get a building inspector come to try and mediate the dispute between yourself and a contractor.
How many jobs do you reckon were a year?
Well, I know that as a business unit, it was averaging about 1,800 to 1,900 complaints a year.
That's crazy. And how many consultants were there to try and help out with it?
So they had ranging from about 16 to 20 inspectors on at any given time and spread over New South Wales, while a lot were Sydney Metro. They had a few regional inspectors based to take care of those complaints because obviously there's less in regional areas.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned there that anything above $5,000, what happened to the?
Well, this is more of the legal side.
Yeah.
I think I can probably break down for you coming on those sorts of things, but in terms of my background, I moved on from being just a building inspector to a senior building inspector,
Yep.
which in that change then meant we were doing strata buildings. And at the time I was there, that was when the retrospective legislation came in the fire cladding.
Yeah.
After we had those number of disasters in
Sydney.
high rise.
Yeah.
The Melbourne and London. And they retrospectively put in legislation saying that certain panels were not now non-compliant. And at that stage, there was, I forget the figures, but there was a lot of the stratas that had been built within the last 10 years all contained that.
Yep.
So under the legislation, they were saying that was a building defect. But obviously, when you got called out to one of those complaints, the builder would supply a fire engineer's certificate from the day he's installed it, saying it was totally compliant. So that led to vast mediations.
Yep.
A lot of the time in my situation, you were only able to get agreements in principle. But I know now the government has opened up even specialist units to try and handle it.
Yeah.
Because obviously the rectification involved in that is really complex.
Yeah. And expensive.
Yeah, well, the cost blowouts are
Yeah.
massive. I think the first few blew out by about 300,000 on their original estimates.
So there's a few points in there that I really wanted to address, and I guess bringing it to attention to everybody. One of the things that you mentioned there was the 6 years that the builders are covered under, I guess, the defects. That's changed now. It's now sitting at 10 years. That's under the RAB Act or the...
That's right.
What's the acronym? I'm not quite sure.
No, Residential Apartments Act is the RAB Act.
Yep.
And then you've also had the Design and Building Practitioners Act. So
that's
the
one I need.
that's
I've got that one. Yeah, I know that
So
one.
that was all brought in with the first building commissioner, David Chandler.
Yep.
So that was the legislation that he had passed through New South Wales. So as you say, it made these specific changes, but the two other points that probably are missed there, it gave the regulator the powers to now address the developer rather than just the builder in terms of that, so they can lay blame. Because as you may or may not know, a lot of these large companies would do a development. They would start a building company for the specific development, sometimes even calling it its address. They would complete the development, and then the day of handover, they kill the building company down. So there was no way for those, like you say, it would come back to the HBCF scheme rather than the builder being able to rectify as they should.
Yeah, which in my opinion is almost the crux of the building industry problem at the moment. There's no accountability, and there's so many avenues and little loopholes that people can use to kind of just weave in and out of getting in any trouble. And I think there's a few things in place now that will kind of hold the builder accountable personally rather than the company, which is a great step forward, I think. Wanted to touch on defects and how important that is and what it means to be $5,000 opposed to under $5,000. So first, we'll start off. What happens to under $5,000 and what happens with that, and then what happens with a defect.
Well, for your listeners' benefit, this comes back to the Home Building Act, which was 1989 brought in. So we've had a few amendments from then. That's what set out the original sort of defects and warranty issues, which specified that it's 6 years for major defects and 2 years for anything other. So all minor defects. So anything that doesn't qualify under the definition was for 2 years.
2 years.
So like you say, a lot of things in my time there, they would be at the 3 year mark where they've actually raised their complaint. So in doing the duties of that job, you were to dismiss all of those items at the time.
And it's 2 years from when the builder stops or the handover has happened.
So occupation certificate, final day on site, or the date of the invoice we used to use. So whichever is going to give the most time.
It gives you 2 years to kind of watch your house to see how it happens, but you've got to make sure that it gets submitted in time.
Well, but I think that's the other part that most people don't understand is it says upon a claim being made. So that means lodging with a tribunal or a court. So if you just register with the builder, in terms of the regulator at the time, they would not see that as making a claim. So making a claim, you actually had to file, and then it would pause your warranty because you've made a claim in the court.
So it has to be with the court, or does it have to be with the HBCF or fair trading?
No. So just just notifying the regulator.
Yeah.
That means that you've got a dispute,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean that you've got a claim,
Yeah, right.
a warranty claim itself.
Yeah, right.
So what the idea of the system originally, from my understanding, is that you would go to fair trading
Yeah.
if you had a dispute. If fair trading deemed that you had a defect, they would write a rectification order.
Yeah.
So the rectification order specified what the issue was. So in terms of it didn't meet an Australian standard, the National Construction Code, whatever that clause is. And then it also gave a time frame for the builder to rectify. So we used to give generic timeframes for small jobs because obviously by the time this comes on for a builder, they're managing other work. They've then got to prioritise coming back to rectify, which is often difficult even for smaller type jobs. But then obviously the larger the issue was, or the more work that was involved in it, we would grant a larger time frame. If that wasn't complied with in the time frame, we would do a rectification order not complied order, and then do a report.
Yeah.
In that report, it specified again the items that weren't completed and gave photos and references to, and then that was to be used as part of the submission in the claim in the court, basically verifying that fair trading backed your claim.
Yeah.
And here were the items that were out. Commonly, there's a lot of borderline type issues, like if you go through the Guide to Standards and Tolerance, as opposed to some of the standards, although they're based off it, there's some things that aren't in the standards.
Yeah.
You know, for instance, like perp ends having to line up down a brick wall.
Yeah.
States it in the guide. Can't find it in the standards.
Yeah. So it's the perp ends is the mortar between the bricks and all your bits and pieces.
Correct.
Yeah.
So in making an aesthetic complaint like that, typically fair trading wouldn't weigh in too much on aesthetics. You'd be looking for defects.
Yeah.
And that's probably the other breakdown is when you're talking about defects as opposed to
What is a defect?
non-compliances.
Yeah.
Or contract issues, because you can have, say, a structure built. You could go and build a house, but if you build the house, say, not in accordance with the approved plans, so technically there's no defect with the house that's been built because it could be to the code, but it doesn't match the plans.
Yep.
So therefore it becomes a contractual defect, still a defect, but what you're arguing is that the builder hasn't built according to the approved plans, rather than naming a clause or a code within a standard or the building code.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting thing because there's a lot of people out there who have been stung and they want to know how to handle it. I think what constitutes as I guess a structural defect that falls within that 10-year mark now, and what is an aesthetic defect? Well, I know we talked about the perp ends, but I know there's something a little bit more. Sounds great, but it's probably like waterproofing and putting door jambs into tiles and waterproofing over door jambs, things like that. People won't understand that these are actually defects and structural defects because they don't know. How can people understand that, and when can they find out? How do they find out?
So I think that's what most people don't realise. A lot of this is spelled out in the Home Building Act itself. So which is, you can openly look up, Google the New South Wales Home Building Act. It comes up, it's section 18B. At the bottom of that section, there is a very clear definition for a major defect, and it has parts to it. So to be a major defect, and I haven't got it in front of me, I'll just try and run off memory, is it has to be a major element of a building. So a load-bearing component being a wall, a footing, something that's taking the structural load. Otherwise, it has to be something within a waterproofing element, the fireproofing of the building, or something specified in the regulations. So I think by that they were using the Safety Act, where they'd introduced the fire cladding from our previous discussion to make that form part of the major defect definition. So anything that doesn't fit that definition automatically becomes a minor defect. But I think the difference where we're probably going with this is when something is a non-compliance to an act or a code, as opposed to the defect itself. I think most people don't realise that to be an actual defect, it should have a loss attributed to it.
Yeah.
So like you're saying with your waterproofing example,
Yep.
when you look at the National Construction Code, it talks about the waterproofing area failing and allowing water to go into an unforeseen cavity
Yep.
within the space. So pretty much as soon as you flood test a shower and you manage to find that the water has left the wet room,
Yep.
there's your defect.
Yep.
And it has a consequence because over time that will lead to the destruction of the building.
Yeah.
So hence it fits the definition.
Yeah, so it's crazy to me because, like, I mean, things like waterproofing, fireproofing, all that kind of stuff, you're never going to find out your fireproofing's failed until it's too late.
100%.
And a similar situation to your waterproofing. Like within 10 years, I mean, if you're having a shower, or if it's if it's one of the showers that don't get used very often and it hasn't been done properly, at the end of the day, you're never going to find any water damage. And then if you're going to find water damage, it's going to be way too late. It's going to be outside of the insurance policy.
Time frame.
So
it can be, definitely.
outside of the critical inspections that the certifiers will do, how can somebody, mums and dads, because they're usually not allowed on site either, so they'll never know.
Another big one.
Yeah. So how do people know? Like, how can they protect themselves with knowing that there could potentially be an issue that they'll never find out about and could potentially destroy their house?
Well, I think similar to from when they engage the builder, there's a host of experts that they should probably be consulting. From even the time that you are signing your contract, it's a legal document.
Yeah.
If you're not a lawyer, you should probably discuss it with a contract lawyer, because if you end up with one of those damage clauses that's $1 a week, there's no force on the builder to actually hurry up.
No.
So you've actually signed the document in that position. But getting back to your point, when you come to handover, I strongly recommend that people get a building consultant, building inspector of some kind with the relevant experience to be able to test these areas.
Yeah.
So in waterproofing terms, we've had a recent change to the standard, so 2022. But prior to that, I can tell you from the time in fair trading, look, it discussed having waterproofing certificates and the requirements of it. I can tell you in the numerous complaints that I looked at, I don't think I saw one certificate.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of tradies, unfortunately, there's this stigma where they go, I've learnt to do it this way. So that's the way I'm doing it. And they don't actually keep up with the idea that actually that's no longer a compliant method to be doing. I even see now, some of the Facebook builders out there openly arguing about the fact that they're not complying with today's standard. They're still doing it to the compliance of the old standard.
I've heard down the grapevine some of them don't even know they have to do CPD points. The professional development.
Even though it says it on your contract, as you tick a box when you sign that says you've done the CPD points.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And I mean, is there a bit of truth in they will get fined if they don't have the HBCF coverage?
So this comes down to the licensing section, which I wasn't a part of, but obviously had a lot of dealings with in my time there. So it's about them checking on the builders. That sort of comes in later on, like as part of that process that I started describing. The main thing that the regulator does is after that rectification order non-compliance, they send you off to court. But then the regulator will determine whether they are going to pursue the contractor.
Right.
And in doing that, that usually ended up, from my perspective, to be what they call a notice to show cause report. So that's where fair trading at that time would make a claim against the contractor, which is pretty much prove to us why you should keep your license.
Right.
Because here's our brief of evidence of everything that you've done wrong. Why should you keep on building? Because from the regulator's perspective, you're taking a contractor's livelihood. So it's a very big step. If you know what I mean. Absolutely.
But there's reason to show cause, right?
Oh, look, to get to that point, I can tell you there were times where I would have, for example, I could have an initial complaint and mediation with a guy, and I remember numerous inspectors as well as myself coming back and going, that guy should not have a license. Like this, put a red flag in, let's make sure you keep an eye, because like the next time. But I can tell you one of the senior guys at the time who was actually deciding on who we go ahead with the notice to show cause on, he used to have a saying that, look, even if you miss this one,
Yeah.
the bad eggs just pop up again.
They just keep coming back.
They just keep coming because they don't change their ways.
Yeah.
They do it again, and
They change their
inevitably
company.
somebody else pops back up. Well, they would look for the records.
Yeah.
And when you were going for one of these notice to show causes, typically it wasn't over one job. It would be over perhaps up to a dozen. So the evidence stack that you're putting in that case is quite massive and comprehensive.
Yeah.
And it shows each of those times when they've not complied. And hence, going through that process, a lot of them would argue. Personally, I never got summons to court, but I do know inspectors who did. And builders who argued commonly would come away with the member deciding that they need more training. So they would order them to take out more training as part of their requirements to keep their license.
Well, we're developing a standard in Australia to try and make sure that the builders are doing the right thing. Like, I mean, there's countless times that I've heard that, a builder's done something dodgy or has kind of taken off on the job or left something unfinished, and then people are left with their livelihoods in their hands, or an unfinished work. They've got an 80% finished house that hasn't been finished, and they've got to find out a way of how to finish the job. And no builder that I know wants to touch another builder, particularly a dodgy builder's job, to try and finish it. And then nobody wants to insure a house that's unfinished. It puts a client in a really, really tough spot if a builder's dodgy. And unfortunately, like, there's a couple of bad eggs that just ruin it for the whole industry. And I think that's the worst bit about it, because I know most of the builders that we work with, or actually all of them, all of the builders that we actively work with, they all want to do the right thing by the clients. But, every day I hear this story from the same guys. It's like, this guy's doing this, or this guy just is not writing contracts for $200,000 jobs, and he's taking this job out because, there's no contract. He's reducing the money. There's no policing available in that system. And I think unfortunately it's just ruining the industry.
Yeah, I think you're right, because from the regulator's point of view, especially with the contract aspect of what you're talking about, that's like the consumer and the builder have agreed on a crap contract or a crap terms.
Yeah.
Do you know that they look at it more as the consumer has openly agreed to those crappy terms.
Yeah.
By signing away, that's why I said before, it's so important to have a look. If you don't understand the clauses, don't just sign your life away and go, because of the way the builder presents them often will suit the builder.
Oh, the HIA contracts, standard HIA contracts, and the standard master builders contracts, they are built towards the builder,
Correct.
which
For
is
their members,
because they're members, and which is fine, because the builders, it is their livelihood, it is their trade. One would expect that they are good enough to make sure that they're doing their job properly. However, there are, again, some of those bad eggs that use those standard contracts against owners, and the worst thing is, I think, is the owners don't understand what they're reading or what they're looking at, and they've just left us, and they're like, yeah, I'm so stoked, let's start building. They go and find a builder. They haven't they may or may not have done their due diligence. They haven't checked their licenses. They haven't done all the checks to make sure that they're actually a decent builder, and then they get stitched up with this standard contract that they have no idea what they're reading. And then once they do that, and something would inevitably go belly up, they're going to go, well, okay, well, I need help now to finish this, or not even finish this, but at least get my money, not even get my money back, get my house that I've paid my money to do.
finish off. Yep.
And then they go, great. Well, and then the lawyer, the conveyancer, or whoever is going to get involved, they go, how's your contract?
Yep.
Well, I don't know. Well, let's go and have a read through the contract. And that's the only time someone's going to pay attention to the contract. Shit, I need help.
Yep.
Oh, wait.
That was what I found at Fair Trading. You would find that they'd be disputing clauses which they signed in the contract.
Yeah.
Like you said before, some builders have put clauses in restricting the client's ability to bring a building consultant on site, which is something which you should definitely clarify in your contract.
Yeah.
Because fair enough, the builder has to run his own safe work site. So for them to prepare their own swim, submit it to the builder prior to getting there, I don't really have an issue with. I can see that as trading properly.
Yeah.
But the idea of restricting that QA sort of quality analysis service is really on the dodgy side, because if you're doing everything on the up and up, to have another set of eyes, why would you? Why would you have issue with it?
Absolutely.
But I think the other side of where you're discussing was the original overarching idea of the home building compensation fund. And the idea that should a builder disappear, go bankrupt, or have their license taken, that this fund was then going to pick up that gap that you're discussing and allow you to finish the build.
Yeah.
And
to a value.
Well, I think this is sort of the issue in the scheme, and don't want to go too much into detail about that side of it, but I think the overarching idea, like from when I started in the trade, it was a different system that was run by the state. So some of the guys I worked with actually worked in that time when they were managing the scheme. Yeah. So I think at that time, the people who'd come out and do the inspection would do the estimate and then make sure that the builder went through and did that QA sort of service. Sure. And when they were running it like that, I believe the scheme was running in a positive. Yeah. So it was actually because everyone was paying that initial insurance, what's now an insurance premium, that levy, that was building up, and the state was actually making money because at that stage there weren't as many claims going through or as high value claims to take it all. But I know under the current system, like you say, there's a bit of a revolving door type process with a number of people. But I think the Act doesn't go far enough. I know they spoke about it for a long time, the idea of these directors' IDs or the looking at the nominated supervisor. So when there's a building company, there's a person whose license is attached to that building company as the nominated supervisor. So they're supposedly the person who is doing all of the QA because they have the license category for the work that they're doing. They're meant to make sure that everything's right. So obviously in the bad eggs like we're discussing, these people will start up the shell company all the time. And under the law, you can be a nominated supervisor for two companies. So they can pretty much have one on the back burner, close the other company, and just shift and keep on going, and that's legal. I believe that's still legal.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. That's crazy. So I think the important takeaway from that one is to make sure that you're not only doing your due diligence checks on the builders and the names and things like, because you not only I know on the website you don't only just search for the builder's business name, but you can actually also look at the builder's name as well.
Well, I really like their upgrade to the license check. It's changed since I was there. Yeah. So now you'll actually find out whether they are okay for HBCF. For the fund, so whether they're actually qualified and they can get certificates.
If they've got claims as well.
Because if not, it has a restriction underneath that says not for works over 20,000. Yeah. Yeah. So if you see that and your works are over that value, you instantly should know that this guy should not be signing that contract. Yeah. Because with the fair trade, there's a fine. It's an instant fine. Yeah. Yeah. So that's one of the few things at fair trading where it was no debate. They just issue the fine. Yeah. You've done a breach.
What's the fine worth?
It varies for companies. I think at the time the company was about $1,500.
$1,500 fine. So if they go through the job, don't sign contracts, don't have a HBCF.
Oh, sorry, no. So they're a number of breaches. Yeah. So under the Act, you've got requirements for your contract. Yeah. So if you don't meet that requirement, that's another breach of the Act. Yeah. Right. So depending on what the breaches are, they all have a penalty infringement to it. Yep. So, and that has a value. Where I say, so even when you talk about 18B warranty claims, so any sort of a defect, technically that's a breach as well. It's just whether there's a PIN associated with what works they've done. Yeah. But when it comes to the insurance, there's another section in the Act that talks about the requirement of having the insurance for the value, which is 20,000. So if you're 20,001, you're in. Yeah.
Okay. So the HBCF Act comes in when the job is over $20,000, and as everyone would be aware that they can drop that number just a little bit to be under that.
Well, you'll see a lot of quotes go back as 19,900.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But that's an important factor. It's a common practice, and it does happen. Like builders will.
It's pretty funny though, because when you think about it, the cost of the certificate gets passed on to the consumer. The builder's not even paying it. Yeah. So like for them to avoid it, I can only assume in a lot of these cases, they haven't gone through the process to make sure that they can be approved. Yeah. And that's all look, when I did it for my building company, it was quite a lengthy process. Yeah. Because I know at the early stages, I didn't have much open experience under my belt. So they went through, wanted all my financials. I think I told them what colour undies I had on for the day. They knew everything about me. Yeah. To then say, finally, you're ticked, but you're only able to do it for this certain value. Yeah. I believe now they've got it in so there's a number of projects to a certain value.
Yeah.
So you only have a certain limit. So until you close off a job properly, that does not allow you to take out another certificate. So technically, if you were to proceed, you'd be trading illegally.
So what does it mean for a job to be like completed, or like when does that HBS? So I think it's probably important to make clear that even though the HBCF has been finished on a job once it's been handed over, the coverage is on that house for that 10 years. So it's still covered on the HBCF clause.
I believe it's 6.5 normally.
6.5, is it?
In residential, but like you say, the laws that we were discussing earlier apply to Class 2.
Yeah.
Whereas, as you know, most people's houses are just a Class 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
So falling under that, exactly.
Yeah. So I mean, so even though the HBCF has been, I guess, finished and finalized, and that can now be put onto the builder's next job, the HBCF coverage is still on that job for whatever amount of years.
Yeah, but it only comes into effect if he disappears. So
or dies,
or has his license taken.
Yeah.
Prior to that,
or going
you're supposed to go through this warranty process.
Yeah.
Which, like I discussed before, is starting a complaint, going with fair trading.
Yeah.
They would then potentially give you a referral if they're all minor defects.
Yeah.
And then you're probably going to have to get your own building consultant,
your
own lawyer, and go to court, which is
spend
typically
hundreds of thousands of dollars.
here.
Yeah, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on a job that you've already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I can tell you back from some of those discussions with the stratas.
Yeah.
I know of a number of guys, and I had it myself, where you would end up giving them the NCAT form for them to go to court because you knew you couldn't resolve it.
Yeah.
They end up, so the defects that were listed equated to about $70,000 worth of defects.
Yeah.
You'd get the builder, says, nah, not fixing it. Strata says, okay, we're going to lodge, we're going you.
Yeah.
So after 2 years in court, these guys have both racked up about $150,000 worth of legal fees,
which is
for
double.
$70,000 worth of defects. Like it's a real common practice that people take a moral stand rather than being able to come some form of an agreement to just get the works done.
Which I think is another massive issue with the industry, because it is known and it's a common practice that builders will be like, such a small figure, take me to court about it.
Yeah.
It's going to cost you $100,000, $150,000, 2 years of your life to fight me in court. And then right at the end, they're just going to go, well, I don't have business anymore anyway. See you later. And as you say, like if everything's tied to one company and old mate's got two companies, you just go, oh, sorry, that one's gone into liquidation, shut that one down, and I'm going to move on to the next one.
That's right.
That's incredible. Like it's in any other circumstances, it'd be robbery.
Yeah, no, well, it's phoenixing. So there's the legal term, and I believe that the regulators are trying to chase or have legislation drawn up to stop it. I know that they've been attempting to track it ever since I was in there. I've been out now, I must say, since 2022. So it's a number of years now. So it would have changed under the change to the Building Commission, but how that's changed, I wouldn't know exactly.
Yeah.
But I do know that was something on their radar way back then.
That's incredible.
But it's getting it through Parliament to then be able to make it legislated.
It's a process. This whole HBCF process it's massive, and it's long.
Well, HBCF is only when they go out. You've got the whole process of just the dispute resolution in statutory warranty.
Yeah,
like we said before, you can be pushing items which are a real hard sell in court. If you're pushing the aesthetics over something, you shouldn't be making a claim in NCAT. You should be looking at whether you've got an Australian consumer law claim.
Yeah.
Because that's the court set up more to the backing of the consumer.
Yeah.
And if your builder has provided you with pamphlets, or you've gone to a showroom and you've seen the display house and it doesn't marry up to that display, that's an Australian consumer law claim. Much better avenue to go for, probably have a better outcome, but they're capped to a value. So this is the issue with both that and NCAT. They've capped to values, and once you go over that, you're at the next stage.
Yeah, just keep increasing into
legal
laws.
cost. Yeah.
So, but it's probably important to be clear too. Like HBCF or ICA's later problem, but there is a cap. there is a cap on I guess the amount that the insurance will pay for, and I think it sits at I think it's $140,000 for aesthetic defects, and then there's whatever the remaining is up to $340,000. And then as you're well aware, you guys like yourself come through, you mark all the stuff, you pick up everything that could potentially be wrong, and then you go out and file a report, and then that's what they would assess their judgment.
That's the beauty of being the building consultant.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily have to worry about policies when it comes to insurance and how they deem that, because I know they vary over time. Sure. They tend to change them. That's how you'll get your odd policy change in the mail. No one reads exactly what they've changed, but there'll be those finite details. Yeah. But from my perspective, they're usually asking for a report in all of these circumstances. Yeah. And it's on your building knowledge. Yep. So from me and the building background, it's whether it's a defect, a non-compliance, and whether it's a major or a minor defect, because they hold the weight, and that's what bolsters your case moving forwards. If you're arguing a whole caseload of aesthetics, that may take you a very long time to prove, as opposed to if it's a clear-cut waterproofing issue, you put your moisture meter outside, you got photos of it, it's very easy to prove that failed. Yeah. But if you're saying that something, I don't like the look of that, in my opinion, you know, you start to get in a bad argument, and that's probably why I haven't ended up in court, because in doing my work with fair trading, commonly people will just put as a reference the 18B, which is the work has not been done with due care and skill. Yeah. To prove that, that's generally, in my opinion, as a building inspector or a building consultant, the work doesn't meet the industry standard. Yeah. But to justify that, you would often have to be summoned to court to give your opinion. So I made it, I know in my time, and I know a lot of the guys probably still do now, you would make it a priority to find a reference. Yeah. Like a decent reference. Like you say, it's a waterproofing. It's this clause either out of the Australian standard or out of the NCC. There's a hierarchy to all of these. So obviously at the top, you've got the NCC. You've got the Home Building Act, you've got the NCC, and then you've got the Australian standards. Obviously some standards are referenced in the National Construction Code, so they're actually more valuable references than what it is a standalone standard. Yeah. And then you start to come down to manufacturers' guides, recommendations, even the guides to standards and tolerance, it's a guide. Yeah. Handbooks, if they're not referenced, but I have noticed in the latest one, in Victoria, they have referenced the handbook for roofing, whereas we haven't here, unfortunately, because it is probably the most descriptive when you come to roofing and walling for metal sheeting. So there's a lot involved in making your claim, and that's why if you were to run into an issue, it's always better to have somebody who's got a bit of experience in that, because you've really, like in my time mediating, I used to find I got taught over time, was to get everybody's list in terms of priority. So if you say these are the things I can't live without, they're the big issues, and these are the things that, you know, I could probably live with over time, but it's just not right. It's a good idea to go through that and cull your items or understand for the time of mediation. Because look, in doing the mediations for years, you can probably lead on to it. A lot of you have your dodgy one-off sort of contractors. This is what we used to talk about, is a contractor who does 3 homes a year and gets 2 complaints. Is he worse than one of your massive contractors running out there who have got anywhere from 800 to 1,200 contracts on the fly, and we have a dozen complaints at any given time? If you statistically look at that, who's the worst builder? And it's obviously the small time. Whereas the big guys, they know the system. They know what's going to cut it. They push the boundaries to court a number of times. They usually know where they get scolded, and that becomes their company line. And same situation. Doesn't matter if it's small or a massive builder. They still have to follow the same process, and they would still have to be taken through to the court system and all the bits and pieces. And it's just generally to make it happen. So that's if you're looking for money. So generally, apart from an agreement with fair trading, unless you come to an agreement, they write it all down, get you both to sign it. There's no actual payments awarded out of fair trading. So that's where, like I say, contract issues, money's outstanding, or settlements. You know, apart from you guys coming to an agreement, you're stuck with going to court, unfortunately. And then you have somebody else, you can have quantity surveyors involved over and above the building consultant just to try and break down those prices of what's owed, what's outstanding, what was done.
And this avenue is only if the builder hasn't gone missing, died, or gone insolvent.
Correct. Because, look, in a lot of cases, the builder may do the dodgy, but unless he cancels his license, HBCF doesn't trigger.
No, and
like as a sole contractor, I should say.
And then you have to try and and that's where the court system comes into place. And then you have to go and take them to court to make them go insolvent, or to say, hey, well, you've busted this job up so badly. Like you need to
then have your work or money order or both. Issued by a member.
How many times do you reckon you see this, like in your industry now? Even
in
now.
The time I was working for, like I say, you would have varied amount of cases. So when I first started, may or may not surprise people, probably the most prolific complaint when I started was cracks in driveways.
Really?
Yeah. So there's a standard for that as well, but you can imagine this is where I go back to the idea of aesthetics and things like that. You know, people pay for a concrete finish of a certain look or whatever, and when it doesn't achieve it, or they get shrinkage cracks in it, which they didn't anticipate. It just depends. Look, a lot of the ones I looked at, a lot of concreters don't cut their control joints in accordance with the standard. Because the standard another standard that had changed, I think it's back in 2018, where the depth is now required is deeper. It actually gives you bigger spacings now, depending on what the mesh was you're using. But pretty much in that dispute resolution, you can run a tape around, stick a metal rule down the crack, and you know pretty much instantly whether it complied or it didn't. We'd write a rectification order for those that were outside the standard, but for what we're talking about in terms of aesthetics, there's no capture on that. And when you look at it in terms of detriment, I very clearly remember one of the senior managers there discussing the idea of what's the detriment from this issue with your driveway. So that's right. But what was the overall intent of having a driveway? It means when you get out of your car, your feet aren't getting muddy. Is the crack in the driveway changing that overall objective? No. It just makes it like they've just spent 20, 30 grand on a driveway, and it's a nice finish, and then all of a sudden, you know, the cracks coming through, and it sucks, but unfortunately it's in a legal argument that's a lot of concreters will turn around and say there's nothing you can do about cracks. Well, look, there is. If you do it to the standard and you've got the control joints right, I do give that, you know, there are weather conditions and stuff that come in. But look, everyone's got the bomb. You know, if you're pouring stuff in over 40-degree weather, you know, you're going to have issues with your concrete. Same as when it's raining, you know, it's going to change the finish. Whether you're taking that into account of what sort of a pour you're doing, what sort of a finish you need to achieve, that's the contractor. And I think a lot of guys stack their work, and rain, hail or shine, I'm doing it.
How many times did that get paid out? Did you find
so
that?
I made agreements sometimes. It really depended on that interaction between the client and contractor. I specifically remember one, which I don't want to say too many details, but they requested a timber look finish on the
driveway.
Well, I think it was a pavement out the back, but it's the same standard.
So of course,
So they tinted up the wood finish to this pavement in their backyard, and obviously the control joints were not deep enough. So all they've done is trowel in the joints, which only leaves you a small deviation in the top. So lo and behold, you get a little bit of change in the temperature and the moisture conditions of the surrounding areas. The concrete's got to move a little bit, and it cracked. And look, to be honest, I agreed with the client. It looks horrible. You know, you've paid all of this extra money to have a timber finish, and now it gives it away because you've got a spider crack running straight through.
And it's so like I can only imagine. I'll put myself in the client's position. It's like, you know, that'd be so disappointing. You're spending all this money, and then you just got this really gross crack through it. But then, you know, on the flip side, you're putting yourself in the contractor's position, and you think the boys have all done the right thing, and they're doing the right thing by the client, and then all of a sudden, you know, one of the boys misses something, and then there's just a whole problem.
But there's the third aspect to that, which is what we commonly had to discuss. If the builder agrees to do a rectification, is what he's going to do make this problem worse?
Yeah.
So, like you would know with bricklaying,
Yeah.
commonly I'd have to explain to people a lot of the time. They'd say, I hate that brick or whatever. And I'd go, mate, do you realise for him to rectify that, he's going to tooth out more than a square metre. It's going to have a mortar differential for at least time, and that's assuming that he's spot on.
Yeah, right mix, all of that.
That's right. So
Yeah.
the chances of him being spot on. So you were looking at this tiny crack or a defect in the brick, which you say you can't ignore. How are you going to be when it's this massive spot on the side of your house?
Yeah.
So like you could pursue this and I can write the order, but I can tell you right now, you're not going to be happy with the outcome.
No, it's going to look worse.
It's far worse.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's I must admit that it was an eye-opener at working for the regulator because you have to see both sides. And people would commonly ask, and I know they still do in court as a building consultant, one of the earlier questions is, would you have this in your house? You know, which is pretty hard sometimes because I don't know, I've busting to try and renovate my house has looked like a dog's breakfast for years now. So in some parts, I'd say, well, I am living with worse. Yeah. And then in others, you think about, you know, you paid that top dollar for it. Yeah. And no, I wouldn't accept that. I'd still be fighting.
Yeah, exactly. And what are the most common defects that you kind of see? Like
I can tell you statistically, it's waterproofing.
Yeah, right.
I think Fair Trading release it that I think there's somewhere about 75-80% of complaints are waterproofing related. Whether that be internal or external, they've grouped them together. And I think that's over all the classes too. So
that's massive. So, like, let's assume for a hot minute that, you know, even 1,800 is the minimum a year. 80% of those problems are waterproofing.
Will involve a waterproofing and potentially a water ingress issue as a result.
What is going on?
Well, hence a lot of the issues with the RAB Act.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of issues with the podium slabs over car parks.
Yeah.
So if you can imagine the expanse of these slabs, they require control joints in them, so they have to allow them to move. Well, a lot of the waterproofing systems that were installed didn't allow for the sort of movement that some of these expanses require.
Yeah.
So like you're saying, over a 6-year period, these things would tear themselves apart in 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'd be flooding in. But once again, the idea under the Acts, you know, if water's dripping into a car park and it's not dripping on a car and it drips and that car park's been built so it's got a pit and a pump in the corner, what's the detriment? You know, but in other cases it's dripping on a Lamborghini parked in the corner, you know. There's a detriment to that Lamborghini owner constantly having those salts dripping on the car. So there's so many different parts that sort of trigger it, and I think a lot of people just instantly go, that's not right. But I think informing your case so that you know that you're in a good position, it's making sure it ticks certain boxes within either the Act or the standards to make sure that the claim's pursuable.
Seeing as though the waterproofing is such a massive issue, let's say for a hot minute that the clients are allowed on site, what are the things that they should be watching out for, understanding that they know nothing about building? If they quickly go in there, what are the few hot points about the waterproofing that they could be paying attention to?
Well, I think the hard thing is now, like I mentioned before, it's changed in 2022. So it is a bit more stringent.
Yep.
There's been a couple of extra details. So like if your shower's within 200 mil of an opening, you're now supposed to have a water stop on the wall to try and stop that. Because look, I can tell you in the time before, as weird as it sounds, I've had complaints where someone using the shower would then, within a few minutes, results in a drip probably about 2 meters away near the entry. So what was happening was, what we worked out in the end was just the fact that when they've troweled on the glue, they've done it horizontally. So it's left a small enough channel so that it's managed to breach the side of the shower and continue almost out of the wet room. And, you know, there's so many things that can go wrong with waterproofing. Like I've seen issues where, although the waterproofing didn't fail, it was retaining water within the side, and it actually got to the point where it discoloured the tiles.
Oh no!
So you had a tide line in the shower from what was the capillary action or the body of water sitting there, and it ended up changing the finish of the tile, so you'd notice it on the glass.
Two-tone tiles.
Yeah, exactly, but not planned. But like you say, similar issues like with brickwork, people not mixing the packs and things, like you have a tide line on the building.
I can't stand it. It does my head in. Like you can tell the difference between the mixes as well. If you don't have the right mix, and usually you got to, like, the guys are doing it. over a week period or whatever have you, and like it's just incredible just to kind of watch. I mean, even with brickwork, like the overhang of a slab, nobody really knows that. That's actually one that surprised me. Even a 10 mil overhang of your footing.
Can I tell you, the big boys have an engineer in their pocket, like. Every time that came up as a complaint, mate, the certificate was in my email that afternoon.
Yeah. Structural grout. That's what they said. It's like an M10.
I've seen some so large that they've actually dynabolted an angle to hold the edge of the bricks as well.
You're joking. Oh my goodness.
But an engineer has certified it.
Yeah.
Therefore, in terms of the fair trading, I no longer have a complaint because it's structurally sound.
And it's fixed.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So they get to determine the methodology. So I think that's probably the difference, even as the fair trading inspector. Although you list what they've missed in terms of reaching the compliance either in the Act or the standard, you're not allowed to tell them how to do it.
Yeah.
Because there's, 20 ways to skin a cat, really.
So, and I mean, it's probably, it's not a defect. It could potentially be considered as an aesthetic defect, depends on which way you're standing, but a brickwork out of square is not a defect. So it's like, and that's where you'll find that overhang of the brick as well. And if they've got,
mate, or the concreters. I don't want to slag on trades, but my old man used to have a saying about that, and it ended up with, if the concreter's on the right side, he's right.
Yeah. Like concreters and brickies are having beers before the sun's up. So
I remember in my apprenticeship, a very similar story. I was only probably a second year carpenter.
Yeah.
And we got a rough crew of brickies on this extension job. And mate, I think the young bloke went and got a packet of throwdowns at Morning Smoko.
Yeah.
So they were on the beers. Mate, there were clouds of smoke coming from behind the brick stack, and I'm sure they weren't cigarettes. Yeah. So we got to the end of the job, and they'd built a whole extension and didn't put a damp-proof course in. So I remember one of the first alternative methods was the injection of the you can put a sealant in, so you drill 2 holes in the brick, you fill it with this injection, and it then creates a course of brickwork, becomes the damp-proof course. So it stops the rising damp, but as an alternate solution. So I learned that as a second year, that there's other ways to go about it, but that meant for 2 weeks I was drilling holes in bricks.
What happens to weep holes then?
No, well, it's more in terms of stopping it for rising damp.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so the weep holes could still be in to exit the cavity below, which I believe they put in. They just didn't roll the damp-proof course. So, in effect, if you had it built up against the wall, you would end up having that capillary action and, again, see a tide line of moisture up the wall, whereas if you've got a damp-proof course in, that alleviates that whole problem.
Oh, yeah. I could get stuck in that for ages.
Well, it's brickwork. It's got you.
I could get stuck in for that for ages. But, so we've talked about a bit about the waterproofing.
I should probably go back to your waterproofing in terms of there's so many facets to the waterproofing. Look, even being around it myself, I've got my own. I've gone ahead and done my certification for my licensing for a waterproofer. Yeah. And I still refer back all the time on jobs because running off the top of your head is fraught with disaster. Yeah. For consumers, you can always, this is the way the industry is at the moment, which is a bit backward. You can download the National Construction Code for free. For free.
And the Australian standards, it costs you $150 or it's more.
Keep going.
More.
150 is a small one. And if you get anything that's quite large, they're all priced accordingly. Yeah. We used to discuss like the idea, I don't understand why not, but they're obviously an external company now manages it. But why, when you pay for your builder's license or your contractor's license each year, why doesn't that give you open access to the standards?
Absolutely.
As part of that.
As designers as well.
But like that, if I write a rectification order and I cite a standard, it's quite likely the builder doesn't own that standard.
I'll see it.
He has no way of being able to verify the exact parts that I'm trying to tell him. And normally there's a diagram. So in a rectification, you don't put the diagram in the rectification order. You just put the clause and the bit. So if that builder doesn't do his due diligence in his trade and keep accumulating these over time or keep up with the changes.
CPD points.
He absolutely has no idea what you're actually asking him to do.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
But if the scheme was slightly different, like you say, what value are you getting by paying for your license? So although we're telling people to go and check, it is like a cost of doing business. So basically most people write it off. Yeah. But if you're doing it to the regulator, why isn't that helping the industry in terms of that knowledge? Especially seeing as we've gone from Australian standards, which had all of the diagrams, which had the big lengthy bits, and back in those times you had to buy it. Now we've swapped, and you watch every time they release the BCA, well, now we've got the housing provisions as a supplementary guide.
Yeah.
But a lot of the diagrams are gone from the BCA. They're now referring you either to those documents or the standards.
Yeah.
So in terms of knowing your stuff,
Yeah.
it's a very costly exercise to go out, like especially as a young builder, all of the facets involved in a house. You know, you'd be thousands of dollars down. And I believe one of the smallest packages was like $2,500 for open access a year.
Well, mate, there's so many things that I could be talking to you about. Like we've only touched on waterproofing and brickwork, like that, and a little bit of slab.
Yeah.
But mate, I'm gonna have to get you back in because I've had you for about an hour. But mate, I'll get you back in. We'll talk about more stuff that can go wrong, and we'll touch a little bit more on the HBCF. So thanks for coming out, mate. I really appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, there you go, guys. We've got Luke from FairGo Business Solutions. Thanks very much for coming out, mate. I really appreciate it. And mate, this is a juicy conversation and a very passionate one. I think more people should be aware of it. And guys, if you have any more questions or if you have anything that you want to ask, please reach out. We're going to hit them up, and then we'll get you back in, mate, and we'll pick your brain.
Happy to.
Legend. All right, cheers, mate.
Thanks, mate.
Appreciate it. Thanks for listening to this week's app of The Lounge. To make sure you don't miss out on the next episode, hit subscribe. We'd love to get the message out to more homeowners like you. Make sure you leave a rating and a review, and we'll see you on the next app.